limiting the trading hours of places that sell alcohol saves lives. That is a finding of a study conducted by the researchers rather, at the University of Cape Town. They looked at health and economic consequences of shorter hours. To discuss this further, we're joined now by the leader of the study, Samantha Filby, who's from UCT's research unit on the economics of excisable products. Thank you so much, Samantha, for your time this morning, and welcome to the South African Morning. Let's talk a little bit about this research. You know, especially when it comes to safe alcohol consumption, it becomes a top priority within the South African context. But what has the data shown you?
Sure. So thanks for having me on the show. Essentially, what we sought to do was to assess the impact of one of the policy measures being proposed by the Western Cape government to reduce alcohol-related harms in the province. So we looked at what the impact of limiting the trading hours of retailers selling alcohol for on-site consumption in the province would be on things like alcohol consumption, the number of deaths and cases of 6 alcohol-related conditions, such as road injuries, intentional injuries, TB, HIV, breast cancer, and liver cirrhosis. We looked at the impact of the policy on the hospital costs of treating these 6 conditions, as well as the costs of crime management in the province, and then tax revenue and revenue to alcohol retailers. And ultimately, what the research points to is a health benefit in reduced deaths and cases of alcohol-related conditions, as well as the hospital costs of treating these conditions and reductions in the cost of crime management in the province. However, on the other hand, our research also pointed to the fact that regardless of the closing time implemented, the kind of people who would be adversely affected by such a policy would be the alcohol retailers, who would suffer a loss of revenue, as well as tax revenue to the National Treasury in the form of excise and VAT.
Well, let's just first start off with the consumers. Because this research would suggest that if people drink, let's say, until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, there's more safety as opposed if they drink all the way till about 3 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And of course, that brings in the notion of a second location. Often hear young people saying we're going to move from one location to the second location. However, how then does it say anything regarding the behavior of the actual consumer? Because I can be in that establishment that closes, let's say, at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, but it does not mean that I will limit my drinks to just 2. I may try to maximize on the time that I've got left. What does the research say about that?
So absolutely, the possibility for kind of substituting away from, clubs, bars and pubs that are now closing earlier is to simply go to an off-site retailer during the day, stock up on alcohol, and even go continue the party in the parking lot. Ultimately, what this inclination to do points to the need for a broader suite of policy measures to address alcohol consumption within the Western Cape and our country more broadly. Trading time restrictions will not be a panacea for reducing alcohol consumption and its related harms, but it will contribute toward addressing the problem. To deal with the broader problem of people feeling the need to drink until they are drunk will require a comprehensive suite of policy measures. So, for example, reducing or restricting alcohol advertising, implementing minimum unit pricing to discourage excessive drinking of especially cheap alcohol. It will also require a framework for addressing problems associated with alcohol dependence. Why do people feel the need to do this way, and how do we deal with people who currently struggle with an addiction to alcohol? So we have one policy measure that we assess the impact of. It will not be the silver bullet. We do need a comprehensive suite of policies to address the broader problem of problematic alcohol consumption in our province.
I just want to labor a little bit on what you said regarding the impact that it would have now on liquor traders, and when we're saying liquor traders here, I often look at the larger establishments as having almost a buffer. It's the taverns that suffer, and it's the livelihood that comes in from the taverns that will suffer. It's those kinds of establishments, the small establishments, the ones in the townships, the ones that rely on the trading of alcohol for livelihoods. How then do we start navigating that very difficult and very sensitive terrain?
No, absolutely. So I think any concerns about employment losses stemming of a policy of this nature are genuine and they are valid. But what's important to consider is that employment losses are only one side of the issue, and for that reason they should be considered with caution. One needs to also consider the overall effects of the policy on employment. For example, the economy is dynamic and flexible. When people reallocate their expenditure from alcohol to another sector, that sector then is now generating income and requires more jobs. Jobs will be created in sectors attracting new demand as people spend some of their money on goods and services other than alcohol. It's also nearly impossible to predict the number of jobs that will actually be created directly because of the policy. For example, if we need to enforce this policy, we need more feet on the ground. It's also not possible to quantify the number of lives that will be saved and lengthened and the job creation that will emanate from these extended lives. So while employment losses are an incredibly valid concern, we need to know that the economy is dynamic and flexible. Jobs will be lost, but jobs will be created. And we can't necessarily quantify the extent of that job creation, but it is conceptually true that that will be the case. In addition to that, when these types of policy measures are implemented, it will be on government's shoulders to actually say, right, we currently have these smaller taverns that actually now are going to suffer a loss. What are we doing in our role as government to make these people aware of alternative job opportunities or alternative sectors in which they can apply their sales skills, their distribution skills, etc.?
Yeah, it's definitely an ongoing conversation here. I'm just thinking here of the taverns and the tavern owner, and the mum who's been able to take her child through school, university, and even have a livelihood simply by having a tavern establishment. But as you're right, integrated approach is much needed. Samantha Filby, thank you so much for your time this morning from UCT Research Unit on the economics of excisable products.